Well, welcome to Virtualization 360. It's about 5:45. Everybody still awake? We're going to have fun. What we're going to do today is I'm going to go over, you heard Bob Kelly talk in the keynote about virtualization and what we're doing, sort of an end-to-end strategy. I'm going to spend time going in more depth about that. And so from the data center to the desktop, really talk about what our strategy is, how we're approaching it, what the implications are, and so on. So we call it 360 because virtualization is clearly a disruptive technology, and it doesn't just impact the virtualization components. It also impacts a lot of different areas, from management to licensing. And just want to make sure that we communicate to you how we're thinking across the board about this disruptive technology, so that you get a good understanding. Before I start, though, I thought it'd be worth, we're always trying to get feedback and understand where we sit and where people are. So what I thought I'd do is just ask a couple questions of you. It's payback time. First question is, how many people here are using virtualization today? Okay. How many of you are using it in production? Wow. Now, here's the tough question. Well, actually, I'm going to do the easy question first. How many of you are using Microsoft technology to do that virtualization? Okay, good. Does that mean I have to ask the other question? I guess I do. How many people are using another vendor's virtualization technology? Okay, so we've got our challenge ahead of us to prove to you that we've got a good set of solutions here, so that you can see that we are also certainly a viable choice going forward. Let me start by telling you, you've heard this today from Bob, but I want to repeat it. And I know that, we talk about this vision of dynamic IT, and sometimes it seems as if we're sort of, it's in the clouds. But the fact of the matter is, dynamic IT really is a vision that makes a lot of sense, right? I like to put it really simply. Getting people and computers the resources they need in real time. It's that simple. I log onto the desktop, my apps should be there, my data should be there, my preferences should follow me. My web server spinning out of control, I should be able to just have a system that knows that and allocates another server and sets up another web server. Right? Things are there in real time. That's our vision. And the way we see that is that there's a number of components involved. User-focused. It should be easy to figure this out, right? If the user can't log on and get to this, then forget about everything else, right? It has to be easy. It should be service-enabled, right? It should act like a service. Turn it on, turn it off, centrally managed. It should be policy-based. This is a very important one. I talked about that web server spinning out of control, right? You want to make sure when that web server spins out of control that there's not a person with with the switches to, being able to turn things on. You should be able to have enough knowledge about that so that the system can know what to do. That's what I mean by model-driven, policy-based, right? There should be rules that you can set up so that things are automated. And that's very important. So as we think about getting people and computers the resources they need in real time, those three are very important. But there's another piece that's becoming very clear, right? Virtualization, clearly it provides almost the grease, the ability to reduce the friction for what allows people to get those resources in real time. So virtualization is another key enabler of this vision. But what I want to make a point is, and this is how we see it, is it's not virtualization in itself. There's always this tendency with technology when it becomes very hot and very interesting for people to define the whole world around that. But what we see is that it's a key enabler as part of other key enablers towards a much bigger vision, which is get those resources out there. So I just wanted to sort of level set here on why we talk a lot about dynamic IT. It's because we think it really does matter. It really does reduce cost. It really does allow you to be more agile and get the resources you need to your people. So just wanted to level set in terms of where we see this revolution taking place and how it's working. So let's get to virtualization. If you think about a world without virtualization, right? It's a world we live in very much today, where everything is stuck to the other piece. So your storage, you see your C drive, it's really the C drive on your machine. Your operating system is installed to that machine. Your applications are installed to that operating system, right? What you see on your screen is actually processing on that machine. Everything is glued together. Now, the problem with that is not so much rolling out something new, although that's got its own problems because you have to do a lot of testing to get to that. It's really about living with this world going forward. Right? Let me ask another question of the crowd. Right? How many of you spend most of your time rolling out new things? Okay. How many of you spend most of your time updating and making changes to your existing environment? Right? So a lot more hands here. The real challenge in this world that we live in today, where everything is literally glued to the other, is that it makes change very hard, almost impossible. And so when you want to roll out a new app, oh, wait, we got to test it to make sure it works in that operating system. When you want to roll out a new server, wait, we have to provision a box and actually literally do it that way. Things take a long time. With virtualization, and this is how we see it, the isolation of all these layers takes place across the board. It's not just at the operating system level. It's at the application level. It's at the storage level. It's at the presentation level, right? So that C drive I see on my machine might be something sitting in the cloud, right? My application can literally just be placed into my operating system, but not alter my operating system. And as a result, I can run any number of applications side by side without it being altered. You want a new server? No problem. Couple clicks, I've got a new server up. I don't have to worry about provisioning a box, thinking about how I'm going to run that workload. So everything becomes a lot easier, right? And it's the great irony of virtualization. Everything's isolated from the other, but by being isolated, they get along better, and they're easier to put together in real time. So that's really how we think about virtualization. It's not just one type. It's across the board. But it's not the only issue we think about. As I said, this is a disruptive technology, and it impacts a lot of other areas. Management, right? Management goes from being very important in the world on your left to essential in the world of virtualization. And here's why. Two reasons. One, it's all virtual. I don't know where it is anymore. Right? Remember Bob was talking about stickies on boxes? That doesn't exist anymore. Where's my SQL server? Oh, it's here now, it's there tomorrow. We don't know where it is. You need management to give you the X-ray vision to be able to see where things are. But secondly, to really get to that vision of dynamic where the SQL server's here one minute and it's there another minute because of load or whatever the issue is, right? You need a system that's model-based, policy-based, to be able to dynamically move things around. So management becomes essential. We'll talk a little more about that. Licensing. It used to be the good old days. I had a server, I had an operating system. I could license that. Now I'm running 10 operating systems on that one server. Raises some questions. So we're working very hard on licensing across the board, whether it's on the server or on the management, because guess what? You now have to manage those 10 virtual guests to make it easy for our customers to be able to manage without worrying about those instances. And so I'll get into a little more about that going forward. Interoperability, right? People do run beyond Windows, other operating systems. We know that, we recognize that, and virtualization makes that even more clear, right? Because you can run multiple operating systems on the same box now, right? We're working with folks like Novell, SUSE Linux, now Citrix, with ZenSource, to make sure that when you're running those other operating systems, that they're supported on Windows. So another key piece. And finally, support, right? One of the things about virtualization, it's simple, it makes things simpler, but it also creates layers. And if one of those layers breaks down, right, you want to be able to, it's the question of, well, who owns what layer? Is it wrapped in another layer? We need to make sure that when these layers are out wrapping each other, right, that we've got the right kind of support. So if one breaks, you're supported across the whole stack. Very important. So these are the kind of issues we think about as we define virtualization. And that's kind of that theory slide. Here's the reality slide. What are these products? And I know you saw the slide today, but let's talk about that. You've got certainly, well, with server virtualization, you've got virtual server today, and you've got Hyper-V, which is going to be in Windows Server 2008, right? Which means that it's just there. Right? Going forward, it's just there, P-roll, right? A lot of good uses of this technology, from server consolidation to business continuity. We'll talk a little more about that, but clearly a great technology that can be used to solve a lot of issues. That same technology is actually used in a very different way on the desktop. We have virtual PC, which really allows you to be able to isolate operating systems on a PC. Not really used for consolidation, but rather for the idea of app to OS conflict, where you have an app that doesn't run on the OS you want to deploy. So it's a good solution for that, as well as test dev and another lot of areas. We have presentation virtualization with terminal services. Again, right? Process happens here, presentation happens over there. Different level of isolation, but very important as we start to think about these technologies. Right? So it's another different type of isolation. And finally, we have SoftGrid, where the app itself is isolated so it doesn't install to the operating system, but it actually runs on that operating system. So it's all these, here's the interesting thing, right? We have all these different layers, and we have all these different products that map to those different layers. And if you think about the problems you're trying to solve, there's no one single tool that's going to solve all your problems. It's really a tool set rather than a single tool that gets you to what you need. And this is really where we're investing. We're saying, look, you've got these different products. That's what you want to have to be able to manage your environment, to be able to deploy to your environment and solve different issues. So again, tool set, not a single tool. But as I said before, management becomes essential in this game. Right? And it becomes very important that we think about management as both physical and virtual. Right? That you don't just have one pool that's managing physical and one pool managing virtual. It's really a combination that's going to give you that opportunity to have that single pane of glass. So for instance, SoftGrid can be managed by Configuration Manager. Right? Virtual Machine Manager actually uses Operations Manager to be able to give you that single pane of glass about how your physical and your virtual environment's running. But it's really at the center of management that's going to allow you to unlock the value of what these different tools offer, this tool set offers. So that's really how we're approaching virtualization today, right? Really thinking about it across the board, both at the data center and at the desktop, and not trying to just have a single tool that can be used to solve everything. So moving on, how does this map to the world that's out there? As you know, we sort of have this model of sort of different levels of people's maturity inside their IT environment, right? People who are basic are literally walking around with a CD and putting it in, which, it still exists today. Trust me, I've seen it. On the other hand, you have dynamic, where everybody's at the beach because everything's self-managing and no one has to worry about anything. So obviously there's a range in between these. And as we think about virtualization, we see that people embrace different levels based on different interests. At first, they'll go in there and they'll say, okay, I'm going to virtualize a couple servers and I'm going to virtualize my apps and be able to have this model here which reduces costs really fast. Right? But once they've done that, they discover that virtualization has done one other thing. It's turned all the operating systems that they've virtualized and all the apps into data files, which means that now they can manage those much easier. They're not hard coding the operating systems and the servers and the desktops that they're running on. Right? They're making it so that you can just literally have a snapshot and put it somewhere, move it to another machine. So the second stage is this realization that there's this increased availability. Right? That I can actually have business continuity happen much faster. I can have provisioning happen much faster because it's data. It's no longer hard-coded operating systems and apps. And because it's data, it's just sitting there. Right? And I can roll it around and shoot it to wherever I need it to be. So that's the second stage. And then the third stage is, as people, and we haven't seen much of this yet, but we believe this is where it's going. As more and more people virtualize, more and more entities virtualize inside your data center, you really end up creating this fabric, right? A pool of generic servers and generic desktops that are not mapped to the applications running on them, and they're not mapped to the users using those machines. They're generic. Whoever logs in gets what they need, right? Dynamic IT. That's the vision. And again, virtualization, by moving in this direction, this transformation into literally just a pool of resources, really can make it happen. It's possible. And that's what we see. But to do it, I reiterate, it's not going to be just server virtualization. It's going to be this combination. So let me dive down and sort of talk a little bit more about what that means. The first one's easy. You've all, well, yeah, you put up your hands pretty much, so you've all been doing this, which is server virtualization, right? Take 3 servers and virtualize them, have them run on one server. Tremendous ROI, TCO, right? You get it right back. And especially with 2008, it'll just be there, right? You're going to be able to do it with every box. Or you can use the Hyper-V server, which we also announced today as a standalone, which you can also use. It's just the hypervisor portion if you're running on an earlier version of the operating system. And again, you know, very clear savings around power, around real estate, things along those lines. In fact, here's a case study of one of our customers who found literally a consolidation of 33 to 2. And fantastic savings. I'm sure you've all seen this. It's great. But here's an example where it's not just using server virtualization to help, where you can help consolidate servers. Terminal services, as I'm sure we've got a lot of users in the room, is this concept of course, putting apps on a server and then running them and sending the presentation to an endpoint, right? And one of the challenges has always been, like at the desktop, putting applications on those servers is the conflict that exists between the apps that are put on those servers. So as a result, what people have had to do is create server silos, right? Sets of servers that run only a couple apps because they can only get along with each other. And as a result, if you look at terminal server farms, there's a tendency for there to be a lot of underutilization, just like with other server infrastructure. Well, instead of using server virtualization, we now use application virtualization to isolate those apps and allow any app to run side by side on a terminal server, thereby reducing the number of terminal servers that are needed to be able to have in your farm, to be able to support the same number of users. So if you look at folks like Russell Investments, they were able to consolidate by 40% on their terminal server farm, and they had hundreds of servers, just using app virtualization, not server virtualization. So again, tool set, not a single tool. Okay? That's how we get to where we want to be. Not only to save and reduce costs, but to get to that dynamic vision. And in fact, talking about app virtualization is another example here of the sort of the tool set model. I'm sure all of you deal with this issue of application incompatibility and the testing that's required to get to that. There is no single way to solve this problem because apps will conflict with each other and they also conflict with the operating system, right? So, how do you solve this? Well, for the app to OS incompatibilities, right, you actually have a number of choices. You can use presentation virtualization, terminal services, to be able to process it on the right operating system and project it onto another, or you can actually wrap it in the appropriate operating system and have it there. And the question is, well, which one? Depends on your scenario, right? You might have a disconnected person, you can't use terminal services. You might have someone who's always connected, that might be the most appropriate thing. It all depends, right? So, great way to solve the app to OS. How do you solve the app to app? Soft-grid, right? App virtualization. So it's, like I said, and I keep repeating it, and forgive me for repeating it, tool set, not a single tool, right? To get to the bigger vision of dynamic IT. It's a combination. And it really is going to be a matter of determining what your scenarios are to determine the best way to solve these problems. And Alamance Regional Medical is a great example where they used both technologies to be able to limit massive regression testing to be able to get to this. So, you know, back to management for a second, you know, what this really means is, if you think about System Center, right? System Center sees all of these pieces. It sees desktop virtualization, it can deploy it. It sees server virtualization, it sees app virtualization. And I'm going to show you a demo, by the way, where you're just going to see all this, right? And it's going to give you a single pane of glass. What does this mean? right? Beyond just the obvious benefit. It means you don't have islands of virtualization, right? Today, in most IT environments where people are using the other vendors' tools, they often find that they have tools that they use to manage virtual and tools to manage physical, right? That's a little problematic over time, especially as we think about our vision of a dynamic environment. That's not very dynamic. The two have to talk to each other. And the last I looked, even though everything was virtual, it's still going to run on a physical machine. You know, I don't think it still needs a box at the end of the day. So this concept of having a single pane of glass to be able to manage all really helps with your, with folks who are learning these tools, right? They just need to learn one instead of having to run multiple systems on there. And, just in terms of that diversity of virtualization that can be managed from a single box as well, there's a lot of value there. So let me just talk a little more about System Center, just so we're clear on it, right? System Center is a brand that is effectively a life cycle management tool, right, to deploy, provision, monitor, and back up your IT environment, desktops and data center. It's that simple. It's made up of these products, right? Data Protection Manager, Virtual Machine Manager, Operations Manager, Configuration Manager. But basically you buy it as one, and I'll go into the price a little later, right? So it's a life cycle management tool. Gives you everything you need, physical and virtual, and all the way down to the app. So you can know, and you'll see this, right? When you bring up the map, you'll see your physical boxes. Some of them will be running virtual machines, and they'll show up there. But it doesn't matter whether they're physical or virtual. You will know what's going down at the app level. And as we think about dynamic IT, we need to know what's happening at the app level. Because if we're going to build models that sort of dynamically move these apps around based on priorities, based on all kinds of characteristics, you need to know what's happening at that level, not just at the virtual machine level. And that's what System Center can do. So let's talk about sort of the solution we bring on the server side. As you heard me say before, right, Windows Server 2008 comes with virtualization, right, as a key functioning role, Hyper-V, right? It costs, and forgive me because I didn't want to put euros because every day that price just kept going down. So I finally gave up. I kept going to the conversion button. I forget about it. We'll put it in dollars and we'll figure out from there. But that's about the approximate cost, right? But to really unlock the value of that product, right, in terms of getting to the key enabling scenarios, right? Server consolidation, business continuity, dynamic provisioning. You really need the management piece, as I said, right? Because how do you scale it out when you're talking about tens or hundreds of servers? You need management to be able to do that. And the management piece, that lifecycle management tool that you need, because whether they're physical and virtual, you're going to want to back it up, you're going to want to provision, you're going to want to monitor, right? Is priced per box, no matter how big it is, no matter how many processors are on there, for $860 list price, plus 2 years of SA, right? So management is as follows: $860 per box. It manages that box plus an unlimited number of virtual guests that are running inside that box. So that means I've got one box, I can do as much virtualization there, it costs me $860 to manage that, right? On Windows Server, there's actually 3 options, right? One is standard, which only gives you one virtualization piece, so it's probably less appropriate for this audience, and is priced lower than $2,400. But the interesting ones are Enterprise, right, which gives you the ability to manage which allows you to run 4 virtual machines per box, or Data Center, which gives you unlimited number of virtual machines per processor. So what does that mean? Let's think about Data Center. Unlimited number of virtual machines there, right, for one price, and unlimited management for one price. Right? And what that comes to is about, again, give or take, $3,600, something around that. Okay? $3,600, yeah, $3,660, right? And again, it adjusts on price and volume. But that really gives you this opportunity for unlimited virtualization per box, because this is what I was talking about before, we're thinking about licensing. This technology is changing the rules, right? We want to make sure that when you build that dynamic IT environment out, you're not worried about the number of instances running on those machines. You have that flexibility as an accordion to have it grow and shrink based on load, based on demand, based on anything. So very important, right, to understand that that's how we're modeling this, and that's how you're going to see us talking about it, right? We really want to encourage virtualization, and we want to price it in a way so that it's very easy and you don't have to be worried constantly about your licensing on virtualization. And by the way, that $360 really is about, if you look at list costs, about 1/3 the cost of VMware. So pretty substantial, I would say. The other thing to note, I know a lot of you have VMware out there. I'm assumed I said the other vendor. Is that very important to note is that the next version of Virtual Machine Manager, right, will be released in conjunction with Hyper-V, right? And it will manage, obviously, Hyper-V. Today it's managing Virtual Server, right? It'll manage Virtual Server, it'll manage Hyper-V, and it will manage VMware. So when I talk about a single pane of glass by which you can manage your entire IT environment, what that means is you don't have to necessarily switch everything over right away to your environment. We fully understand. You've made these investments. You want to keep them. But we think there's a lot of value in the management piece being a single pane of glass. So Virtual Machine Manager will allow you to do all of it. And let me be clear. All of the functionality that you have today, right, this live migration, this and that, it will all be in there, all part of VMM. So just want to be clear about where we're heading with this specific solution. How am I doing for time? Okay. So I've gotten over sort of that first hump of virtualization, right? The buying, getting the hypervisor or app virtualization, all the pieces, and we talked about management. And we talked about sort of that was that first stage, right? There's a second stage, and that's the increased availability. So if you think about it, here's another really interesting thing about virtualization. Virtualization normalizes processes. Think about availability day for operating systems, right? It's different than how you manage your data, because an operating system alters the machine you're on, right? Well, because, as I said before, operating systems, when they're virtualized, become data, you can use a backup system like DPM, right, to literally take snapshots of these data files and bring them over to a backup system. So in the case that your first machine should go down, you literally then just bring over those snapshots to your second machine, and you're up and running. Okay, that's good. We all kind of understand that process, right? We've done it with data for years. Now we're doing it with operating systems. But it gets better. Applications act exactly the same way, right? So virtualized apps just get snapshotted, right? They get brought back to the backup system, and for whatever reason that server should go down, virtual or physical, just bring it back to that next machine, and you're up and running. Okay? So this is very important, right? Processes that you probably, from what I can tell talking to customers, they had a separate process for app business continuity, for operating system continuity, and for data. What we're saying is, make them all the same. Bring them down, because everything's been normalized to data. So another piece of the process here. And again, much faster, right? I mean, just though I know that there are customers out there with mission critical users who literally have desktops sitting out there idle in case that other person's desktop goes down. That goes away in this environment, right? Your desktop is just a device. It's not your device anymore, right? That becomes very important. That's the world of dynamic IT, right? Get people what they need when they need it. And so, again, just sort of in summary of what I've been trying to say here is, what we fundamentally are doing is really turning IT into a service, right? As I said, everything becomes available. So on the server sides, the virtual servers come up and down based on load, based on whatever's needed in real time, right? At the desktop, wherever you log in, right? Your desktop follows you, your app follows you. It's yours. Sounds like a great vision, doesn't it? And you're probably thinking, good, we'll come back in 5 years and maybe we'll see this, or 10. But no, I'm going to show it to you today. So now we're going to get to the fun part, the demo, if I can figure out how to use this. No, that wouldn't be right. Ah. Okay, somehow I thought it would show up here, but that's all right. I knew I was going to forget. It's the wrong one, too. Now, does someone have a solution for this problem? Pass at word 1. Okay. Nope. Oh, and cap notes. All right. Hold on a second. I'm going to just see if I can move this back so I can see. Okay. Okay. I thought I was going to see it, so I'm going to have to look a little bit like this. There's a column in the way. It's not that easy. Let me see if I can move over here a little bit. So what do we have here? We actually have Windows XP running, right? It turns out it's virtualized. It's a virtual machine. And in fact, furthermore, what I really wanted to show you is that we've got a virtual app running inside a virtual machine. This is software enabled. Okay. So I just built a little slide inside PowerPoint here, which has been virtualized. So we're talking about a virtual app, right? It's running on a virtual machine, and I'm going to show you how it's being all managed by Virtual Manager, VMM, right? And so again, if we think about what dynamic IT is in this environment, really I see it as sort of 3 key areas, right? One is this concept of real-time provisioning, be able to get those resources to people in real time. Secondly, making sure that it gets to the right person, you need policy-based management, right? We talked about that. And finally, we need to make sure that you can get it from anywhere, right? Because if I give you this promise, you log in here, it's there, then I log in here and it's there, you should be able to get it no matter what. So let's sort of, I wanted to frame this conversation in that concept so you can see as I show you what we're talking about, how that works. Excuse me. So we've got, again, if you look at this, you've got actually SoftGrid, virtualized app running here. Help make Office better. Okay. Which only goes to prove to you that when SoftGrid's running on that machine, it really thinks it's running on that machine and it's interacting with that machine, right? Because it brought up that little icon. But so what you see here again is a virtualized app, right? And running inside this virtual machine. Well, this virtual machine is actually being managed by VMM, which, as I said before, think of management as that center of gravity, that single pane of glass. So what you've got is, in this case, we've got a server running, right? We've got a terminal server running. We've got an XP session running, and we've actually got a Vista session running as well. So that's, again, think of VMM as this place where you pull this all together. Right? So I'm going to walk through a couple features of VMM because I think it'll help you understand sort of how that plays out. Couple things that you know with VMM, right? So if we're talking about this environment where everything becomes sort of this resource you can tie to, what we've done is we've actually built this concept of hosts, right? So you've got this physical host. It actually sees it. Now, unfortunately, this is not very compelling because it's only got one host because I have my demo with my one machine. But imagine, if you will, do me the favor that, trust me, if I had 5 of these, you'd actually see 5 hosts out there. So think of that as just that base foundation upon which things sit, right? And it's just there, and you can plop things down anywhere you want. Then you've got the model of virtual machines. Right? So in this case, we have those 5 virtual machines. Right? Now those 5 happen to be put on that one box, but you could disperse them any way you want, and I'll show you how that works. It's very interesting. We've also got a library, and this is great. This is actually tremendously useful. You can build a template of a virtual machine, right? Just the right configuration, and then you can actually save it as a template in the library. So that when you create new virtual machines, you're not starting from scratch every single time. Instead, what you're doing is you're actually, being able to pull from these, and I'll actually show you that. So again, it's kind of creating this foundation of these different configurations that you can then drive off of to be able to build your environment. There's also, of course, the standard jobs, administrating and reporting to give you information about how this is all working. So let me walk you through what what creating a new machine, a new virtual machine looks like. So first thing it'll do is it ties right to that library. And it'll say, do you want to build a brand new machine, configure yourself, right, which would be this choice, or do you want to actually go and create a template? So what this does is you can see, here's all the templates that I showed you before, and you can actually go in there and pick from these choices, which machine you would like to use. So we'll just, I don't know, pick a terminal server. And so as you do that, now you've already got that template. It's already set. You don't have to reinvent that, right? Once you do that, you give it a name. So I'll call it tester. And then you move on. And here's a great part. You decide what's in that machine in real time. How many network cards, what kind of cards, what kind of memory, all that's configurable, right? So based on the kind of environment that you want, you can actually set that up. So it gives you that environment. And then finally, actually quite simple, you move to sort of either place it on a host or you just store it. I built my template, but I don't want to use it right now. We're gonna place it on a host, and this is where it gets very interesting. What it does is it actually goes out there and it polls all the hosts. Again, pretend there's more. Right? And what it does is it stars for the best host based on the profile that you built. Remember how I had all those choices about different types of processors, different types of memory? Those configurations, right, will actually play a role into determining which host to go to. So if you've already got a host that's being used by a lot of processors, or a lot of virtual machines, you're not going to do that, right? But if you've got one that's really low utilization, it'll go out there and determine that. So very good way to be able to dynamically provide people with the right environment, in which to place this host. And you can imagine that data is being retrieved. Here's an example, right, where System Center is sort of the single pane of glass. It's being retrieved from Operations Manager, right? So it's an example where an existing, established tool is being leveraged for the data about your, your environment to be able to give you this kind of data to determine the best place to place that virtual machine. And then finally, it's quite simple. You just sort of save the path, and you can decide to add some configurations if you want. And finally, if I click this button, Create, it will create. Now, many of you I know use PowerShell. So here's the secret about VMM, Virtual Machine Manager. Actually, PowerShell is completely behind it. So any action you do, you can actually take that script now and use PowerShell to automate it. So if you don't want to do the clicking and the pushing, but you rather want to do the scripting, you have that option with PowerShell. Every action you're able to grab the script for. It's very, very powerful in that way. I am actually not going to hit the create button because with one machine, it churns for a while, so I don't want to slow down my demo. But trust me, it creates virtual machines. The other feature that's available today is the ability to, of course, go and poll your network and determine which physical workloads are actually good candidates for virtualization. So again, using a lot of the same models there, right, in the starring system, you can actually, off the bat, run this, figure out what are the expression is low-hanging fruit. What's the easy ones to virtualize right off the bat? And you can actually use this tool to determine that, and then P to V them. By the way, there's also the ability to take a VMware formatted disk and turn it into a VHD so that you can also then start managing it today with VMM version 1, right, 2007. Now, as I said before, the next version of this will allow you to manage VMware as well. But today, you can take any VMware environment you have and switch it over so that you can manage it through the physical virtual environment of VMM. So I just wanted to give you the kind of the lay of the land. The other thing, as you've heard me refer to it, is that this ties in very closely with Operations Manager. Right? And so you saw a little bit of that today. But what I want to show you a little more, again, because I'm running this on one machine, you'll have to forgive me, I actually just have some screenshots of how this works. Again, because that would require running the Operations Manager on the same machine here, which is already doing a lot through all the virtualization and so on. But very interesting point, right? You can click into Operations Manager, and right away you can ask for a display view. And then what it will do is bring up that single pane of glass of all your hosts. Those are all your physical hosts. All you have to do is click on one, and it will now show you your virtual machines. Once you click on that, you can go down and see all the different processes going on. Once you do that, you can actually look at your application. In this case, it's SQL, right? The fact that it's virtual does not matter, right? You know what's going on. So it's very much the idea that you can drill down seamlessly between the different versions and really not worry whether it's physical or virtual. You will get the same amount of information. As I click out open there, I'm going to get more information. As I click on this, I actually can get down all the way down to the data level. So it becomes very, very seamless. That single pane of glass becomes very important. Because one day that might be physical, the next day it might be virtual, or virtual and then physical, or it might be on one box one day and another box another day. Right? So separating the physical from the virtual doesn't really help. Right? Putting them together, bleeding them together really does save time, saves your view. And that's our vision for this. So let me go back to Virtual Machine Manager. So again, right, Operations Manager collecting all this data, it's going to provide that base foundation by which you can start moving these different entities around based on load, getting back to that dynamic view. I am going to go back to my virtual machines. And now I'm going to show you sort of, so we've talked about VMM as sort of the center point, right? Now we want to think about, you said, David, this dynamic IT concept, right, that you could dynamically provide, things in real time. So let me just show you this. Let's start with the fact that there is a server, right, and there's a Windows server here. And what I'm going to do is actually this server is running a SoftGrid server, right, app virtualization. And so what we're going to do is open Active Directory. Remember how I said if you think about that triangle or you think about dynamic IT and the key components, we talked about policy-based management, right? Everything I do, I don't want to go to a machine anymore. I don't want to go to configure anything anymore. All I should be doing is setting it up and forgetting about it, right? Set the rules. It should all be done through policy. So we're going to go to Active Directory, and we're going to look at this person named Demo. Oops. What did I do there? Okay, and what you can do is you can make, with SoftGrid, you can make them sort of members of these groups, right? So you would probably do this not as a person, but as a group, but just bear with me, right? And with this, right, what we've done is we've actually made this person a member of just one group, PowerPoint. 2003, right? So if you remember, and I'm going to go back now here, and we look at XP, right? And here's another great feature, right? You saw that little thumbnail? I can just click on it and actually bring it up. As you remember, well, remember I was running PowerPoint. Here's PowerPoint running using SoftGrid, of course, right? Because that is what I gave demo user who's logged into that XP session. Okay, great. Now, what I'm going to do is go back to my server, and I'm going to add another, give them another app. Let's give them Microsoft. So now I'm just going to give them Microsoft Office Word, right? All done through policy. And again, wouldn't do it for an individual, you do it for a group. Right? And so we'll apply that. And now we're going to go back to, let me just close off my server for a second. We'll go back to XP, and we'll actually, it's as if I logged in again, we'll just refresh the apps, because that sort of just is a way to go and pull the policy and determine what's needed. And in doing that, as you might see, we have automatically provisioned that person for another copy of Office. That's how easy it is to get them the applications, right? Dynamic IT, how much more dynamic than that? Right? Was it already there? Was it? Okay, well then you know what we're going to do? We're going to remove it. I'll tell you what, let me keep going because I don't want to run out of time. You'll see how we move it. So when I run this, and I hope this works, unlike the demo in the keynote, what we've got is now Word running. Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do, just to prove my point. I'm going to go back to the server, and we are going to, in this demo here, I want to show one of the other features of virtualization, not just provisioning, right? But why don't we add another copy of Word, right? Oh. Let's add XP. I hate to be proven wrong. Okay. So let's close off the server for a second. Let's go back to our desktop. Let's go in here. Let's kind of minimize this. Let's keep it running. Let's refresh the applications. I'm going to watch this time. There it is. Okay, this time. Had to make it happen. Right? So, recovery in full time. Right? Now, here's the best part, right? So we're running 2003, right? You saw that. That's 2003. And now we're going to run XP on the same machine at the same time. Please don't try this at home because all the conflicts, right, with all the things. So what am I really showing here, right? Dynamic provisioning and the ability to run apps that normally would not like each other side by side because nothing, right, is being written to this operating system. In fact, I'll show you that quickly. We'll go a little techie here. I'm going to open the regedit, and if you think about where Office should get written in the registry of this operating system, it would be at HKey local machine software Microsoft Office. There's no Office, right? No strings attached, right? That's virtualization, right? The app is, but let me be absolutely clear. If I go into Task Manager and we look at applications, there they are. And if I look at processes, WinWord and WinWord running twice. Right? So it's running on that machine. It sees it. It breathes it. You know, when you save it, it saves to where it normally would save. Right? But it simply doesn't alter that machine. Separating the person, the application from the hardware. Right? That's the key here. It's a stateless computing. Right? And that's going to provide that foundation for getting people what they need when they need it. So that sounds cool. But as we know, you don't always want to run this. A lot of layers here to click on, especially when you're clicking on it backwards. As we know, right, there's different scenarios for different people. Right? We talked about this before, right? So sometimes you want to do app to OS incompat and solve those issues. You might use TS sometimes. You might use VPC sometimes, right? This is a very important thing, right? There is no single silver bullet to solve the problem of the desktop or the data center, right? You need that tool set. And the scenarios really drive that. So what's important, though, is that no matter what scenario it is, people should get the same thing, right? Back to our user-focused model. So as I mentioned before, we have a terminal server session here, and I'm going to bring that up now. Well, for some reason my key isn't working, so I got to do it this way. That isn't working either. Maybe it decided it didn't want to work with me. Oh, there we go. So now we have a terminal server session we're logging into, right? So what's happening there? Right? The server's one place, the presentation's another. But, and I proved it because there's two versions of Word there. Same experience, right? And so, very important, right? So let me actually do something here. So at least I've showed you that your apps have followed you. Let's talk about your preferences. So we're going to put that in here. I know what happened at the keynote and it didn't work, so I'm just, think I know why. So Because really, I'll tell you what happened, right? What's going on here is my preferences, right? My registry set, this actually writes to the registry. It didn't write to the machine's registry, it's writing to this app's registry. But what SoftGrid does is it breaks off those settings, those personal settings, as a separate data file, gets sent back to the server, right? And sometimes if you do the demo too fast, it doesn't have enough time to go back to the server. So we're gonna actually close this off. Okay, and we're going to close off the terminal server session for a second. We're going to go back to XP, and man, I hope I'm not setting myself up for failure here. But we're going to run that, and no, it didn't work. Okay, obviously I didn't do that right. Did I do it on XP? Is that right? No, I don't think so, though. No. Okay. Well, anyway, seems like it's not deciding to work today. So let's shift gears a little bit. Right? A lot of you I know are considering moving to Vista. Right? So as we think of dynamic IT and we think of Vista, right, these principles I've been showing today, the concept that things move with you, your data, usually your preferences, right, will move with you. And again, in this environment here, let's bring up Vista, right? And you can imagine that and I'm going to refresh the apps here, right? What happens is that, as you think about moving people to Vista, right, and you understand the apps, right, it becomes very simple to have people and have the apps follow you, right? And have the settings follow you as well. So again, right, you can go in here and be able to have people's applications follow you, their apps follow you, the same experience, right? And I want to make a point here, which is the following. So I've showed you XP, I've showed you TS, I'm now showing you Vista. The apps are following you, right? I know there's a lot of talk about hosting desktops on a server. We actually have a license for it. It's called Vista Enterprise Centralized Desktop, right? By the way. I don't know what happened there. Just didn't give enough time. So the point is, right, whether it's processing on the server with terminal server, whether it's running on your desktop with XP, whether you've migrated people to Vista, whether you want to host this whole session on a server, wrap it in a virtual machine, right? It doesn't matter. Your experience for your users will be the same. And that's really critical. That's really what again, this vision of dynamic IT is really about. So wanted to give you that sense of how that works across the board. But there's one more piece. I talked about access anywhere. So far, all the experience we've talked about is happening literally at a desktop, right? Whether it's that it's showing up somewhere else, but you're still having a desktop session. Well, VMM also has an interesting self-service tool, right? There's a lot of potential uses for this, right? Some of us think, it's great for test dev, right? I've got these people who want these VMs, but I don't want to create virtual server sprawl by creating all these VMs that they're never using. So you can create a self-service portal that has a lot of rules around how many VMs they can use at the one time and things along those lines, right? But the concept is that you can, as an administrator, set up these VMs and have them sitting out there, right? They're not necessarily spun up until a person asks for them. It could be used in a lot of different ways, right? Remember the triangle I showed? So I've showed you dynamic provisioning. I hope I proved that point. I showed you policy-based management because we did it all through Active Directory, right? And now what I'm going to show you is this concept of access anywhere, right? And it's not just go from machine to machine to machine, but it's also access. And this takes a second to load. There we are, right? There's Vista. There's the same exact session, right, that we were running before, now available through a web browser. So again, to solve the IT environment problem, there is no single bullet. There is no single tool. Right? It's going to be the combination of a couple things to match the different scenarios. Right? It's the exact same thing. I can actually sit here and I can control this. Right? Move it back, and then hopefully when I do my demo the next time, it'll be in the right place. Really just trying to get to that whole concept of what this is about in terms of dynamic IT. I hope that's helped. Right? Management at the center, all the different pieces, server, app virtualization, presentation virtualization, desktop virtualization, all being spun around, right? And using sort of the knowledge from Operations Manager to be able to dynamically pull these together. So we're going to go back to slides for just a few minutes, and then we can go to questions if I figure out how to use this again. Let's see. Where are we? Oh, okay, good. So where are we heading? You heard today we announced this Hyper-V product for the server. And let me be very clear about it. Right? So all our offerings, enterprise, data center, and even standard, will have this Hyper-V technology in there. In addition, you will be able to buy it separately as a standalone if you've already got, 2003 or other Windows operating systems running, and you want to be able to use that and take advantage of the latest hypervisor technology to be able to drive that. So that's really what's happening on server. And again, the whole story on that is when the Server 2008 is available, right? There will be in there a beta of Hyper-V, and 180 days or less from that point will be when Hyper-V is in its final version. So that's server. On the desktop, there's actually some pretty exciting news. You heard Bob Kelly today talk about SoftGrid 4.5, or actually I keep calling it SoftGrid, but it's App Virtualization 4.5 beta, right? That'll be available next year. And there's a lot of issues that I know many customers out there have wanted to see dealt with. They're dealt with in this edition. Namely, and for those of you who have used SoftGrid, I know you're aware of this concept of context. One of the things about isolation is, guess what? It's isolation, right? So if you have a plugin to Word, right, today, unless you package those two together, Word will not see the plugin because they've been isolated from each other. That's goodness, and it also causes those problems because you want them to see each other. 4.5 fixes that, right? It's called the context problem. So this ability, and it's very important, right? Because as we think about virtualization and we think about managing virtualization, we want each piece, right, to be granular, right? Because sometimes you want to put them together, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you want this ability to combine in real time on demand. And so by solving the context problems, it means that we can be more granular in terms of our virtualized environments. So that's SoftGrid at the desktop. Management, I said it before, I'll say it again, right? What's interesting about management is the next version will ship very much in sync with Hyper-V, and it will also manage other third-party virtualization hypervisors. So immediately it will manage VMware, and very soon thereafter it will also manage the Citrix XenSource hypervisor. So again, diversity on that front. Interoperability, I can't speak to 2008, but I can certainly tell you about what we're doing and we've done, which is we've worked with companies who provide alternative operating systems, Linux and so on, to make sure that when they're running in our environment and they're managing our environment, they're running right, and that you have the right kind of support for that. A couple other things I want to point out. We have a program called Solution Accelerators. I think most of you might know it as desktop deployment, business desktop deployment, BDD. That technology is now being applied to virtualization. You will be able to both get some very good sort of planning and designing tools for both SoftGrid and server virtualization. But you will also be able to get this, what's called the Microsoft Assessment and Planning tool, which is effectively a product that will go out, and by the way, it will be free of charge, and be able to look inside both the data center and the desktop and do analysis in terms of what would be the initial way that you could start virtualizing both environments. So it'll come back with a proposal that'll say, here are the apps that you could quite easily virtualize. Here are the servers that could quite easily be virtualized. Here are the products that you can use to be able to do all that. So it's a very nice tool that we'll be providing to partners as well as to customers to be able to get to that. And these will be available quite soon. Certainly by February of next year, you'll be able to get to that. So very important. Beyond that, we have a lot of resources on virtualization. One thing we've done is we've made it very easy for people to get one-stop shop on virtualization at Microsoft. And it's the site you'd expect, www.microsoft.com/virtualization. If you go there, you will find information on all the different technologies I talked about. You will find over 25 webcasts going from, what we call level 100, the very, basic level, all the way to the deep dive at level 400. Over 25 on a whole range of subjects, both on server and desktop. You'll find white papers, right, on all different subjects. And you'll see, it is also really our place for where we're going to post events and things along those lines. So if you want to keep up to date, you want to see, well, what is Microsoft doing around virtualization? That's the site to go to. In addition, there are these other sites which are more product specific. You can get to all of them from that virtualization site as well. But it also talks a lot about solutions. How do you use this technology? You're going to see case studies. We already have over 40 case studies on that site, and you're going to see a lot more over time, and especially around how people have used these technologies together. So, very important resource here that obviously is a great follow-on to this. So with that, I have to encourage you to complete your evaluation of this talk. And I did get that thing to work, by the way, so just want to make that point. And I think if you submit within 12 hours, you're entered to win a touch smartphone, which I've seen. They're actually quite slick. So I want to thank you very much. And what I'd like to do at this point is open it up for any questions. But thank you for all your attention. And we have microphones over there and over there. We've got about a little less than 15 minutes, so unless I answered all your questions.
I have a question here.
Yes.
You talked in one of the slides of how you're going to work with ZenSource and Novell. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Sure. And so I'm going to repeat the question just to make sure. How does Microsoft work with ZenSource? So yeah, even before ZenSource was acquired by Citrix, we had been working very closely with ZenSource to ensure that when someone was running, right, Zen hypervisor, right, or some on a system, or Linux on a Windows system, that those would work well, right? So if someone's running Windows on Linux, or we're running Linux on Windows, that those two would work very well together. So that was the initial relationship that was tied to it. Now, obviously, that they're part of Citrix, right? And as you know, Microsoft's been a long time. I think Citrix has been our ISV partner twice. You can certainly expect that to continue in terms of that type of relationship. Absolutely.
Hi. A lot of system builds, certainly historically, have been very specifically tuned to hardware and resources. For example, my DBAs spend a lot of time very precisely tuning their box in relation to where the data files go, the log files go. If I were to say to them, now would you put that on a virtual machine and we will just have that run on whatever server feels like running it, they'd probably have heart failure. Is there a gap in terms of resources that virtualization will grant at the moment? Or is this something that is viable for someone that is looking for the maximum performance in terms of, for example, SQL Server?
So let me see if I can summarize your question. And there's a weird feedback, so I'm not exactly getting it. But you were asking whether databases would be the appropriate, can be virtualized because of the performance issue?
For example, yes.
Okay. So really good question. Right? Today, right, you still have to question these workloads and actually look to see whether their performance will be the same, right, in the case of database and so on, when you virtualize. There's no doubt that you need to do that. And certain workloads have profiles that don't quite match up in terms of performance when they're brought into a virtualized environment. Databases sometimes being part of that, right? It's not as if today you can virtualize everything, right? There are workloads that, that because of the performance issues you raise, cannot be virtualized. Going forward, will this go away? There are people who are, startups and Microsoft itself are looking at these performance issues and making sure that over time we solve those issues. But absolutely, today, I think it's fair to say you can't make that promise that, oh yeah, every workload will just virtualize. And in fact, I showed you that starring system with VMM. VMM looks at those type of characteristics. I didn't really dive in, but you can actually look at the standards that are set behind that starring, and you can actually change it. But it looks at things like CPU utilization, I/O, all the characteristics that you would be concerned about if you put a workload into a virtualized environment. So that's where VMM is the beginning of that, where it can actually analyze those and to tell you, whether it will help or not. But it's a good question.
Tied in with this, see what we're trying to do here is to generalize and to move away from specifics. What about server applications like IIS that have resources that are specific to the machine name that they're created on? How does virtualization deal with that?
IIS can absolutely be one of the workloads that can be virtualized. Because that's part of where that layer exists, right? That you can put that in there. So in fact, if you look at some of the early areas where people have virtualized IIS and other web servers, were certainly that first part. It all depends again, right? Is it going to be high performant? Is it going to be less performant? You have to look at a number of characteristics.
Where IIS has registry settings that are specific to the machine name.
I'm sorry, what was that?
IIS has certain registry settings that are specific to the machine name. How can you redeploy an IIS server with a different name?
It's, there are methods that are there. There are systems that are there that people have best practices. So I would follow up on the site to learn that.
Thank you.
Just on the left here.
Yeah, you've got a number of products at the moment which aren't supported in production in a virtualized manner, like Exchange Server 2007. What are the plans for support going ahead?
Good question. We are working towards extending that. We actually have a policy at Microsoft that says that every workload has to be virtualized. However, for some workloads, development groups that feel like making that promise would just, provide underperformance and the expectations would be near, they can get an exception. So there have been some exceptions. But with 2008, you're going to see less of those exceptions happening. And so things like Exchange and other workloads over time will absolutely be available as virtualized.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I have a question about a laptop with virtualization desktop enabled. If I have, like you, Word, for example, virtualized, and I connect and I use it, but then my line file will fall out. Can I still use it?
Good question. So again, you remember how I said it sort of depends on the scenario, right? If you think about a laptop, if you know that person's always going to be connected, maybe you can use, I don't know, a combination of terminal services and maybe app virtualization brought down to the desktop. If you know they're going to be disconnected, right, terminal services isn't going to work for you because you need that network connection, right? So in that case, you're going to want to have these apps running on this machine. Now, you're probably referring to, well, yes, but you said these apps stream over and they only stream over just a portion. That's true. That's one scenario, right, which enables me to move from machine A to machine B to machine C and just have those icons show up and then stream in real time. But if I, as the administrator, or if you as the end user know that you're going to disconnect, I can set it up so that when I log on with my profile, it'll bring everything down. It'll literally bring it all down into cache so that you can disconnect. I, as the administrator, can set a threshold on those apps so that, you can't keep them forever. Right? There's an opportunity there. Does that answer your question?
Yes, but what about my data?
Good question, right? So SoftGrid really tries to keep away from data in the sense that it doesn't try to alter the data. But there are many good, and especially with Vista, right, with folder redirection and a lot of other pieces that allow you to have storage, what I would call storage virtualization, right? Having that data sitting in the cloud. There's a lot of good solutions out there, including folder redirection. Yes?
Question about compatibility. You just said every command can be sent through PowerShell.
Yeah.
Does that mean that any software company, any competitor could develop any interface to manage virtual machines?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the end of that question.
You said every command goes through PowerShell.
For VMM.
Yeah. Could anybody then develop a software to manage any functionality of the VMM?
Oh, in terms of adding extensibility to it?
Yeah.
Yes, you can add, well, there's a difference there between PowerShell, driving VMM, right, in terms of the functionality, versus adding new functionality to VMM. So let me be clear about that, right? What PowerShell does is allow you to drive all the functions of VMM, but you can do it through a scripted fashion.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a tool to extend the functionality of VMM.
No, I was thinking about really managing from another software, not extending. So I could do that without a problem.
If you've got the scripting capability. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I think we're done over there, so here, yes.
Yes, hi. One question refers to VMware and the capability of physical to virtual wizard that VMware has. Will Microsoft Virtualization Technologies offer something similar?
Okay, so, and I hope I mentioned this, VMM has a facility, right, in it to be able to take any physical server and virtualize it, so do the P2V. And in addition, it also can take a VMware format, VXT, and turn that into a VHD, which would be able to be managed through VMM today. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, and
Okay.
the other question has to do with the capability of VMware to move a virtual machine from one host to another by losing only a single ping in the network access of that server. I just wanted to know if Microsoft will offer a similar feature.
Okay, so today, right, what we offer is the ability to do that within a couple seconds, right, because of the way we switch it in terms of where the storage point is, right? Expect, of course, that to improve over time. There's no doubt about that.
Okay, and I would assume that clustering would also be as enhanced. In other words, physical and virtual clustering also supported.
And in fact, in 2008, one of the things to know about, and this doesn't necessarily, it applies more broadly than virtualization, is that clustering is dramatically easier to pull off. I think they showed that a little bit today in the demo, but it really is, I would encourage you to go to see some of the sessions that talk about the clustering technology, because it is dramatically easier.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I have two questions. First about the server. You say that Zen and Microsoft have been working a lot getting Linux to run on Microsoft and Windows to run on Zen.
Yeah.
Does this mean that you will be moving away from the no support for Windows on VMware and Zen systems, so that PSS will not drop a support case just because?
That's the hypervisor level, right? What we've been really talking about is to make sure that the reason we've been working with Zen is because there's a strong connection there. There's cooperation on both sides, right? To be able to ensure that that's working. What we are having, and we announced this today, is what's called the third-party hypervisor validation program. And you know how ISVs have always had the stamp of, sort of this logo program where it's certified that a certain application will run on Vista or on server. It's the same principle, but we'll be doing that with third-party hypervisors.
So you will be moving towards supporting Windows and VMware?
Well, I think the way I would phrase it is it's going to be in the interest of like just as ISVs go and apply for this validation, right? If VMware chooses to do that, then there'd be a certain validation process there that would get to the question you're asking.
The other question, today with SoftGrid, you usually don't use the same package between OS, so you wouldn't run the same package on a terminal server that you run on a Windows XP client. Is that something
Actually,
you're going to be
no.
moving away from?
Normally you can package once for both terminal services and most clients. There are some exceptions, but generally one of the real values is the fact that you can have the single, like you saw me do, right? A single package that will feed both.
So you actually believe that that will be working in the production environment?
Yes, absolutely, because you know what? Are you coming from a terminal services environment?
Well, actually, I've tried doing this for maybe the past year, and I'm actually amazed that you use the Office package with SoftGrid today. But yeah, okay, SoftGrid 4.
Well, you know, we should point you to, we'll get you a resource. I have someone right there who can help you.
Thanks.
And he knows it really well. You see, there was a reason you came, because you never heard this pitch before. Next question.
Hi.
Hi.
Could you ever use SoftGrid and virtualize an application to make it execute on a computer where that application usually is not compatible with the operating system?
So what you're talking about is OS to
Application, yeah.
application. Generally, no. Right? So that you know, there has been confusion, and that's why we've tried to be clear that app to OS incompatibility is generally better solved with VPC or terminal services.
Okay.
Having said that, off the record, give it a try.
All right. Thanks.
You never know. I mean, it has been found to be work, but it's certainly not part of the value proposition or promise that we make. But it has been known to sometimes work.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Hi. Today you said it is not possible to have a live migration of host from machine from one host to another. But at the same time, VMware announced that they plan to have a migration of data stores in real time. That means that when Microsoft announced something.
Well, I can only answer this, right? I mean, I can't give you, the roadmap that has not been defined, so I can't give you a date. But I will tell you that we certainly understand the value of something like that. So it's not as if we're ignoring the issue. It's just that, we want to make sure that when we roll out Hyper-V, that it scales and performs. I mean, this live migration thing is great, right? But people are today, we hear, still focused on, I mean, there's less than 5% of servers that are virtualized, right? We're interested in helping to mainstream the virtualization of that, right? But by obviously making it a key feature in the operating system, right? And making sure that the things that they initially get to, remember I had the sort of the 3 stages of adoption, right? That first stage, consolidation, continuity, provisioning is there, right? So we've really focused on making sure that when it comes out, it's rock solid and that people can leverage it to really mainstream and get beyond that 5% of servers today.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Hello. Today in my data center, we have lots of servers connected to network storage via fiber channel. With Windows 2008, the idea is the host being connected to the storage and the virtual machines being a file disk, or there isn't a chance that the virtual machine could be connected directly to the storage network?
So what I'd like to do is follow up with you to make sure that I get you the right answer on that one. Because I can't give you that. I don't know exactly the right answer. But we can, why don't you come up and I'll get your email and I'll make sure you get that answered.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to make sure it's right.
Hi there. I have 2 questions. One question is, you mentioned that the VM has a feature built in which can analyze servers, physical or logical, and then make a proposal how to virtualize it.
Yes. So that's what we call intelligent placement. Right? So we'll determine which are the best hosts that are sitting out there and which are the ones that maybe have too much going on. And so it'll determine through the starring system the best way to place that virtual machine.
makes it also a proposal if I have, for example, 200 servers, how to put it on a bunch of new powerful servers.
Yeah, it'll, you know, I know we're running out of time. I should have shown it because there's actually a whole set of characteristics that you can reveal and change in terms of what's making those judgments.
Okay.
So I you know, I don't know if we're, well, I'll give it a shot. It might take too long here, but let's just see. Okay, where's my mouse? Oh. Let me close that down. If you go to new virtual machine, let's just select something really fast. Here. Okay. Select.
And is this, which operating system does it support?
I'm sorry, which operating system does VMM run on?
This is it just...
It'll run on you know, all your standard server, Windows Server operating system. Let me just get to this. So here's your hosts and customize rating. See, you can actually go in there and see all the, you know, disk I/O, memory, network utilization, CPU. So you can actually do some pretty, you know, there's a default setting, but you can also do some pretty granular settings on this.
Okay.
It's actually really, for a first version, it's a very sophisticated product.
Yeah.
And the feedback we've had from customers has been very
So
strong.
it supports the Windows 2000, 2003, etc.
Yeah,
Okay. The second question would be, you said this component can also do the P2V migration.
Yes, it does.
Okay, and for which platforms?
For which platforms? For Windows.
Operating systems.
Oh, for Windows operating systems, it'll do 2000, 2003, and eventually, obviously, 2008 when that next version comes out.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
How will performance be on Hyper-V versus virtual server and VMware?
I can speak to virtual server significantly better. I can tell you that much. You know, it's just hard. I mean, you know, as you know, it's still early, right? The beta will be coming out. But I will tell you the RC0, which is available, so you can download it, has had some very positive responses. So we haven't published any performance, you know, versus VMware. But just architecturally, if you think about what virtual server was, which is hosted virtualization versus hypervisor-based, the performance is just dramatically better.
Would that also go for Linux virtualization?
Linux on Hyper-V, you're saying?
Yes.
You know, I haven't had access to that data, so I can't speak to it now.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, I have 3 questions, but I'll try to be quick.
First one. You can virtualize one of them or something.
Yeah. Do you look at SoftGrid as a way to provide an answer for low bandwidth situation? I mean, how much data does SoftGrid?
So let me answer that. I know where you're going, right? So does it make sense to stream an app over a low bandwidth? There's a threshold. It all depends what it's, you know, it all depends on the type of app, the kind of bandwidth you have, and things along those lines, right? And so, again, this gets back to my point earlier with scenarios, right? Where, especially if you're feeding the app to a terminal server or to a desktop or to a hosted desktop, right? It depends on, you know, when someone logs in, right? What kind of bandwidth do they have? What kind of security do you care about on that app? Like, would you like to keep that app at the server because you don't want the client-server chattiness going across the line?
Okay, but could you tell me more specifically, once you push through, for example, Microsoft Word, how many megabytes did it transfer from the host?
So if you're going to do that initial threshold, you probably want about 100K, right? Somewhere around that line for Office, right? But here's the important thing. You can pre-cache these on a machine, and then when you connect, it's just a very small amount of data that does the, you know, the check to see that it's the latest version.
Okay, I got it. Now the second one, what about resource allocation, mainly CPU pooling? I mean, I'm interested if Hyper-V will have many more features that Virtual Server 2005 has. I'm not very satisfied with CPU resource allocation
Sure.
in Virtual Server right now.
No, I understand that. And I think that, you know, let me bring up a slide. I thought I might get this question, so. Here's some data around some of that. I don't know if that helps provide you with some information. But if you, like with the other person, if you want to give me your email, I can certainly pass it on to the right person to get the precise question. But is it better than virtual server? Absolutely, across the board. It's just, it's a much more, you know, mature technology.
Okay, I forgot a third question,
That's all right.
so that's about it.
It's over 7 o'clock, so you're forgiven. Do we need to go? One more question.
Hi. Active Directory, why isn't supported under a virtualized environment?
Well, I'm sorry, why
isn't supported in a virtualized environment? Active Directory.
Yeah. Again, you know, as someone had asked earlier on, right? We are absolutely committed to making all our workloads work in a virtual environment over time, and you will see more enter when 2008 is available. But just in terms of, you know, some of the characteristics I showed you with the starring system, there's hesitancy. I mean, it's not just Microsoft, right? A lot of ISVs will not support you if you put it in a virtualized environment. I will tell you this, we are absolutely committed to making sure they all are, but people are still getting exceptions today because they don't want people to be disappointed when they put it in and expect it to run the same way. But you will see more and more, especially with 2008.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. And